Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 472 for the 5th of November 2017. Richard Saunders here with you, fresh off the plane, coming to you from Sydney, Australia, fresh off the plane from Los Angeles, although originally from San Francisco. No, hang on, we'll take it back. I was in Las Vegas. I flew to San Francisco, spent a couple of days there, flew to Los Angeles, spent a couple of hours there, and then flew back to Sydney, Australia. And along the way somewhere, I picked up a little bit of a cold, so I hope you'll forgive me if I sound a little bit under the weather. Speaking of the weather, it's cool and overcast in Sydney today with a bit of rain. Coming up on this week's show, I speak to the legendary investigator of all things paranormal, psychic and conspiracy, and monsters and things, Joe Nickell. The one and only Joe Nickell. I sat down with Joe at the recent CSIcon in Las Vegas, and we had a wide-ranging talk revolving around John F. Kennedy and Yowies and Bigfoot and things like that. Always a pleasure to interview Joe Nickell, and that's coming up at the top of the show. After that, a grain of salt with Eran Segev, more of his interviews and insights from his recent world trip. And this week from the European Skeptics Congress, Eran interviews Sofie Vanthournout from Sense About Science EU. What is Sense About Science doing in Europe to aid science in policy making? Find out with Eran Segev. Then to round off the show, more from the CSIcon in Las Vegas. I chat to Susan Gerbic from Guerrilla Skepticism before the event started, and then after it was all over, to get her insights. In fact, we begin our interview in the bar down near the check-in desk at the Excalibur Hotel. And there's some tango dancing going on, some tango lessons. Find out what Susan Gerbic thought about the whole CSIcon coming up to round off the show. And a big, big, big thank you from me to Barry Carr and Kendrick Fraser and all the people at the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry for putting together a wonderful convention. I was very lucky. I took part in a panel on the last day of the convention, a very wide-ranging panel about problems facing science and what maybe we can do to make these things better, to improve the general process of science. It was very interesting. It was Dr. Rachel Dunlop, Cara Santamaria, and Britt Hermes on that panel with myself. And I really enjoyed it. It was fascinating. And I look forward to hearing it back again or seeing it, because when you're part of a panel like that, it's easy to forget all the things that were said. And thank you to all the people who came up to me, and I'm sure to the other panelists, and said that how much they enjoyed that panel. And thank you to all the Skeptic Zone listeners who came up and said hello, many from Australia. I was very happy to see so many Australians in Las Vegas, and I was happy to dish out some musk sticks to everybody too. Sometimes people weren't happy to get them, but the Australians were at least. Some other little announcements. Don't forget you can see the Skeptic Zone live here in Sydney on the 18th. Saturday the 18th of November as part of Skepticon. I think we're scheduled to be at something like 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the other room. There are 2 sessions going on. There's a podcasting session and there are general talks. Anyway, I think the program will be updated soon, but I'll link to all that in the show notes. I look forward to seeing you at the Australian Skeptics Convention dinner on the night of Saturday the 18th. And you can get your tickets. There are still tickets left at skeptics.com.au. There'll be magic. Well, I'll be spoon bending anyway. There'll be entertainment. Lots of fun, and the announcing of the awards, like the Bench Spoon Award and so on. I can't wait for that. Skeptics dinners are always fascinating and great fun, and all you people who come to Skeptics in the pub, I hope that you can also come to the convention dinner. Buy your tickets now. And here's a note from our friends at Think Inc., the people who are organizing the convention this year. They say, love intellectual discussion, critical thinking, meeting like-minded people, and volunteering. Then we want you. The team at Think Inc. are looking for awesome volunteers to help assist with event operations, including merchandise, customer service, talent greeting, and so much more for Skepticon Australia and Jason Silva, Awestruck in Sydney, on Saturday the 18th and Sunday the 19th of November. If you are based in Sydney and are interested in volunteering for either or both of these events, then please complete the form, and there will be a link to that form on this week's show notes of the Skeptic Zone. So there you are. Sydney people, if you'd like to lend a hand and volunteer for some of the events and goings-on for the Skepticon and Jason Silva, Awestruck in Sydney, head to skepticzone.tv and have a look at the form, and maybe you'll end up being a volunteer. And thank you to those sharp-eyed listeners who spotted that on the website. Now I've removed the link that's been there for years to the direct download of the Skeptic Zone. Now, if you go to skepticzone.tv, there's a player there. You can simply click the big green button and hear each week's episode. You can click the YouTube link and watch it or listen to it via YouTube. And until now, you could simply right-click a link and download the episode as an MP3. Well, that link is still there. It's now just incorporated into the big green player. So if you look at the big green player at the top of each episode, the notes for each episode, there's a download link. There's a couple of little icons, and one of them is a download. So just click that, and you can get the episode. But now it's time for me to run downstairs. Oh, have some chicken soup. That's for cold, isn't it? Chicken soup. Yeah, hot tea. Ginger tea, maybe some ginger chicken soup. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. And I'm catching up with Joe Nickell. Hello, Joe Nickell.
Hello, my friend. Good to see you outside your country.
Yes, I think the last time I saw you was probably Brisbane.
Brisbane it was, yeah. And a terrible time. I had a scary time. Looking for the Yowie and the terribly haunted Tower Mill where they hanged people and ghosts are, still there peering out, and it's just too awful to talk about.
Yeah,
and if you believe a word I'm saying, of course, you're not as skeptical as we would like here at Skeptical Inquirer.
You've gone as white as a sheet, I can tell.
Yeah, every word true.
Now, have you had, I know it's very recent as we speak, but just yesterday or the day before, these JFK files have been released. Have you had any chance to look over what's been happening there?
I have not, but of course I have done some things with JFK. For example, some years ago I attempted to help Robert Oswald, Lee Harvey's brother, stop the exhumation of Lee Harvey. There was a crackpot named Eddowes, a British solicitor or barrister or something, and he had this theory that Oswald wasn't Oswald, that when Oswald went to Russia, those shrewd Ruskies had spirited him away and sent us a look-alike back. Can you imagine someone fooling Oswald's mother into thinking was... I mean, it's just too silly for words. Or fooling Robert.
Yeah.
And so they wanted to dig him up, and they were going to prove that Oswald wasn't in Oswald's grave. It was the Soviet look-alike.
The Soviet look-alike.
And when you would say, well, wait a minute, why don't the fingerprints and everything show that Oswald was Oswald? Then, of course, in true conspiracy fashion, the guy would say, well, they switched those. They switched fingerprints, don't you know? Yeah. And I said, well, then, if you dig him up, what are you going to do? Use dental records or something? Well, they will say they switched those too. So I had a theory. Robert said, yeah, if we could do that, he would be very happy. I knew maybe America's foremost ear identification expert, Alfred Inarelli. Nature doesn't make two ears, fingerprints, snowflakes, whatever. And we had very good photographs of Lee Harvey Oswald's ear in Marine Corps photographs, and very good ones of the quote-unquote Dallas assassin. And Iannarelli studied those and said, trust me, those are the same ears. They are the same person, no question.
Yeah.
And he's a forensic expert in that field, and we worked on several cases together. And the problem was that there was just this media hype and determination to dig Oswald up, and nobody was going to give us the time of day on something they never heard of, like ear identification, So they did dig him up, and guess what?
I can't imagine.
Who was in Oswald's grave? Well, it was sort of like who was in Grant's tomb.
Yeah.
It was Grant in Grant's tomb and Oswald in Oswald's grave.
Yeah.
But
what lengths did they go to? Was it DNA in the end?
Well, this was kind of before DNA was so handy and popular and everything. Today we would do that. But Robert Oswald's a very decent man, and unfortunately his brother was a wacko who did a terrible thing, and Oswald had to pay. But his view was, look, I buried my brother, and now I want to be left alone. And so he was very angry about it. Another connection I had to the case was just that I was able once to be at the Texas Book Depository in Dallas and look out the window where Oswald fired. And I think it was an easy shot. The road made a bend, and was that motorcade had turned and was heading away from that window. So when you have your rifle and you're firing, you just have to keep raising the rifle gently to keep
the line of sight.
Whereas, of course, if it were going at right angles to you, that's a difficult shot.
That's a good point.
It's a very difficult shot.
Yes, you just have to alter your the rifle up slightly because it's down the same direction, the same.
And just a very easy shot. I thought, as someone who's shot a lot as a boy, particularly, and also the people need to remember that of the 3 shots fired, and we know that they have the shell casings and so forth. Of those 3 shots, 1 missed. So this claim that it was this phenomenal, accurate situation is pretty much ridiculous. And when people talk about another gunman, on the grassy knoll
the famous
or whatever,
knoll,
well, that was all people mistaken because of echo effects of this gunshot sound. They thought it was, multiple shots coming from. It was never any evidence for anybody there that was good evidence. It was all pretty silly. And I've said, if there was another gunman, what happened to his bullets? You can talk about the super bullet and make jokes about it, but in fact, that rather pristine bullet that's called the super bullet that went through.
The magic bullet.
Went through Kennedy and hit Connolly and all that. People say, you couldn't have done all that without being horribly deformed. But you just rotate that bullet a little bit, you see it's flattened on one side, and it's a copper-jacketed bullet made to minimize distortion.
Right.
So I'm not impressed with that. And so if we're going to talk about and call that, the super bullet, then you have to talk about the grassy knoll bullets as being evaporating bullets.
Yeah.
Where did they land?
Yeah.
Because we can account for everything from the 2 bullets that hit. One went through Kennedy's throat and into Connolly. The other one from the back came out the side and blew Kennedy's head open. And that's that.
That's that. So
so it's just the conspiracy theorists are just silly people who
won't give up.
And
in fact, whatever's been released now will only fuel them, I would imagine, no matter what it says.
If anybody wanted my opinion as to what to read to become informed, I would recommend my friend Gerald Posner's book, Case Closed. And another book that's good is Vincent Bugliosi's book. And I forget the title of it, but Bugliosi was the guy that did the Charles Manson stuff, and it's a pretty prominent guy, and he did a book on the assassination, and he is also a sensible book, looks at the evidence sensibly, and both of those books show that Oswald did it.
I'll link to those in this week's show notes. Now, was he the same guy? And I have it in my archive somewhere. There was something called Lee Harvey Oswald on Trial, where, do you know this one, where they went to the UK in the 80s and had a whole trial with as many witnesses as they could get?
Bugliosi might have been involved with that, I'm not sure, but I'm usually not too impressed with those kinds of stunts. I don't care what some, make-believe jurors think. I just really don't. I prefer to look at evidence, the best evidence I can find, and then, see what that shows.
Yeah.
I do have to believe somewhat in the jury system, but after all, there's the O.J. Simpson jury. And I could name you some other juries.
Yeah.
I have this theory that in the Casey Anthony case, that was also the O.J. Simpson jury who came out of retirement so they could go let another obviously guilty person off. Well, you have to have some fun, or else you just get very frustrated at juries just not really quite grasping what should be grasped.
Yeah, well, it's certainly not a perfect system.
I don't remember what the mock trial you're talking about. I don't know what they found.
They found that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone gunman. That was the conclusion of this mock trial.
Then I've been unfair to them. but of course, I think what we know forensically and everything is we're very high confidence level that Oswald was the lone gunman and often by himself shot and killed Kennedy. What I'm not as confident of, though I believe it myself, but I would put a little lower confidence level. I'm not as confident that no one else put him up to it or had any other realm. But I think, again, though, it seems very unlikely. They're just almost all the indications that would suggest that somebody was behind him are a bunch of nothing. And
it's lurking in the background as some connection or possibility, but you don't put too much weight on that.
I don't.
No. So what's next for Joe Nickell?
Oh, I hope to stay alive a little longer and cause a little more trouble. I am doing some work. Friends are begging me to stop. Probably Massimo here is saying, for heaven's sake, Nickell, please quit this. But I am working on this thing that I've been working on the last few years, as time permits, that I call the Bigfoot bear.
The Bigfoot bear.
Yeah, and let me define that.
Okay.
That's any bear, brown bear, black bear, any bear, that standing on its hind legs, which bears do frequently, is mistaken for Bigfoot. And I've collected a bunch of cases. I've collected a bunch of cases where people say something like this. Well, at first I thought it was a bear. But then I noticed it was standing and walking on two legs like a man, so it was Bigfoot. And you think, no, I think you just proved my point. That was the Bigfoot bear. Or they say, at first I thought it was a bear, but don't you know all the bears in this whole region of wherever are black bears. And this animal, this creature, was blonde. So, and I said, well, no, apparently you're not aware that black bears can be any color from white to black. There's even a bluish black type called the glacial bear up in the Alaska area.
Well, that makes sense.
Southern Alaska. Yeah. So when I got a report from just over across the border into the Yukon of a 7 foot tall bluish...
A bear standing up would be 7 foot tall.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Or even 8 feet tall if it was a big brown bear. Maybe.
Yeah.
So, mind you, it's like so many things I've done. People are if I identify 2 or 3 mystery monsters as owls, then, Nickell is saying that it's always an owl. No, I don't. Or if I show a few cases where an otter or multiple otters is the likely explanation. Nickell says all the lake monsters. Well, I do no such thing. I don't know how people can say such a thing, which is so blatantly untrue.
It's easy. It's easy to say that, to write you off as...
So let me be clear. I'm not saying that all Bigfoot reports are bears, upright standing bears. But I am saying I can show a number of really important historic cases where that's the most likely explanation. It could also be a hoax. It could be a guy in a suit. There's some other possibilities, but I try to rule those out and apply it only to cases where I think it's probably sincere people saw something, were mistaken, because they thought it was Bigfoot and it's probably not. And so I'm doing a lot of work on that topic.
Bigfoot bear. That's a really interesting angle, which has never occurred to me, of course.
Yes.
Yeah, I wonder what they would say in Australia for the yowie.
Well,
we don't have any bears down there.
No, it doesn't apply. And the yowie is a little bit more of a mystery in that it's pretty easy and pretty simple. The Bigfoot bear is a wonderful, easy, very probable explanation for a lot of Bigfoot sightings. But you can't use that. And I've been yowie hunting out in the bush, and so there isn't an easy explanation. But I think some of those are just other critters that people didn't see well. Some are hoaxes, and I think the Australian ones may be also somewhat influenced by the American Bigfoot propaganda.
I've always thought that from the very first time when I was a boy and I heard about this thing called the yowie. Yeah. It was in the 70s, and I knew Bigfoot, and I thought they're just ripping off. There's just people in this country want there to be a Bigfoot here.
Exactly, they do.
Yeah.
And so that Bigfoot concept in North America is not only fooling North Americans, but that mentality is spread to our friends in Australia, darn it, and is attached to yowie. But the yowie is not the same creature, and it does have to be discussed in a separate way. And but for now, maybe I've given it all the attention it needs. You decide.
You decide, folks. You be the judge. Well, Joe, thank you very much. And I think very shortly you're hosting a lunch where you'll be giving a talk.
I am.
Yeah.
I am.
And what can we expect? What's the flavor of that talk going to be?
Well, everybody was going to be served filet mignon, but that was vetoed.
Bigfoot burgers.
My ideas are not always met, with the respect they deserve, Richard. But I'm going to talk about a concept that this guy sitting over here, this is Massimo Polidoro. You probably have never heard of him.
Ciao, my friends in Australia.
The world's most charming skeptic. And Massimo and I go way back years. And he's suggested that I'm the detective of the impossible, and that's my talk. I'm going to single him out in the audience and embarrass him during my talk.
That sounds like that's a good title. I look forward to it, and we'll be heading in shortly. But for now, Joe Nickell, once again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Greetings, listeners. It's me, Captain Disillusion. On my YouTube channel called Captain Disillusion, I, Captain Disillusion, analyze viral videos of the strange and unbelievable. I explain how interframe video compression, 3D motion tracking, and stock VFX elements prove that Justin Bieber is not a secret reptilian alien, that those videos of ghost cars are just unintentional optical illusions, and that lightning did not strike a few feet away from a girl on a beach as we saw in the news. I'm real fun at parties. My best friend is a lens flare.
Eat a dimmer switch, Disillusion.
I do know other people. Sometimes they even show up in my videos. People like Skepticism's grandpa, James Randi, Cirque du Soleil acrobat Erica Lins, weight loss enthusiast Penn Jillette, and the actual Beekman from Beekman's World. I hope you'll check out my adventures, interact with me in a platonic way, and even consider becoming a patron of my work. You can do all that and more on YouTube or at CaptainDisillusion.com.
Grain of salt, grain of salt, grain of salt.
Let's all take this with a grain of salt. Here's Eran Segev.
Grain of salt now, grain of salt.
Sofie Vanthournout, you work for Sense About Science Europe.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about the organization and about your job in it?
Yeah, so Sense About Science is an organization that was founded in the UK about 15 years ago in response to a lot of media scare stories at the time, like mobile phones frying your brain, GMOs, a lot of topics at the time where the scientists weren't really speaking up. So there was a lot of discussion on what the problems were, and there was a lot of needs for input from the research community, and they were not doing it. So Sense About Science was launched for that reason, to motivate researchers to speak up and to stand up for science in public debates, but also to motivate citizens to use evidence in their debates. So we work very closely with citizens and also with the research community.
As you said, the organization has existed for a while. I think I receive their emails. I'm sure there's skeptics around the world who receive their emails of people interested in science. When did the European activity start?
We started that about a year and a half ago. There were already some projects, some campaigns which kind of naturally were working at a European level or international level. But there was, at some point, they felt there was a need for really a presence in Brussels as well. At the same time, I was then still working for European science academies, so providing evidence from the research community directly to the European institutions. And I also felt there was a need for a Sense About Science in Brussels, because the public debates and the public engagement was completely absent in these discussions. And the research community wasn't really coping with public opinion and the public debates. So when I discovered Sense About Science, I thought that is what is needed. Yeah, the timing was good for both of us. So we kind of naturally joined up forces and joined my expertise with evidence in EU policy with their expertise in public engagement.
So basically, if I understand correctly, at least the European part of Sense About Science is focused on policy.
Mostly, yes.
Is that different? In terms of I understand that both organizations probably do a bit of both, but in terms of focus areas, would you say that it's different? I
have a bit more focus on policy. So is that different? In a way, for instance, our Ask for Evidence campaign, which is a public campaign where we stimulate people to ask for evidence when they come across public claims. It's very often used now for, say, consumer affairs. Does this shampoo really make your hair grow better? Or does this toy really help your child sleep better? Or whatever. And I am now consciously trying to get some more questions about EU policy. So in that way, it is, I do have more focus on policy. And I wouldn't be so much involved with, myths around things like, consumer affairs or what works. So I do focus on things that are relevant at EU level.
Does your role require you to be in close contact with European politicians?
Yeah, yes, for sure.
And how has that experience been?
So what we're trying to do is make sure there's a good use of evidence in EU policy. And the approach we're taking there is by connecting citizens who ask for that with their representatives in the European Parliament. And up to now, we're only just starting, but we are seeing that is a very effective approach, because politicians tend to listen to their voters. And the science community has been trying to convince politicians for years on difficult topics like GMOs or endocrine disruptors or whatever, with very little effect, because it's a democracy. and these politicians, they represent the people, and they represent what the people want, or what they think that the people want. And that's the point that we're trying to make. It's not always you're not always right when somebody says the people don't want GMOs. That's incorrect. There are some people who don't want the GMOs, and they are very often very loud. But is that the majority? There's plenty of people out there, environmentalists even, who do think that GMOs can be used under certain circumstances. And we're trying to give a voice to these people so that the politicians get a better view of the needs for evidence in society.
It's a broader point, of course, which you've raised in your talk. So we are at the European Skeptics Congress, and you've raised this point in your talk about how politicians want to represent their constituents. Now, I think that partially, obviously, as you said, the question is, do they really represent their constituents, or only the loudest of the constituents? But there's also the question that I would raise or ask of those politicians about, first of all, protecting their constituents, not just simply doing what the constituents want, but also protecting them, for example, against false claims. And on the other hand, there's the issue for you of perhaps educating the constituency to make sure that they require of the politicians something that is right and supported by evidence.
Well, also the politicians are misled sometimes on what the evidence says. So they might sometimes... let's assume here that the politicians are, good politicians are good politicians and have the best possible intentions.
Okay.
Because even that, is not always the case, of course.
Yeah, we do all know that Nigel Farage was a member of the European Parliament.
Exactly. But let's assume that they all are. Even then, also the politicians need to get their information somewhere. And they may be as misinformed as any of their constituents. And they may be thinking they're doing the right thing by banning this or that because they genuinely believe there's a problem with that. So obviously you also need a research community that is available to provide good evidence and to bring it also in a form that it's usable for politicians, because that's an extra challenge, actually. A politician cannot just start reading 50 different scientific articles to know what's going on.
So do you... So you produce digests of some sort, I presume, and
no, what we do is, in all of our campaigns, we try to be catalyzers rather than doing it ourselves. We're trying to create systemic change. So in the Evidence Matters campaign, we are trying to motivate the people to speak up for evidence in EU policy. But we have other campaigns, so for instance, Voice, that's VOYS, Voice of Young Science. That's a network of early career researchers who are trained and motivated by us to stand up for science.
Last question I want to ask you was with regards to the link with the skeptical community. Of course, we're in the Skeptics Congress here. We discussed this earlier, and you said that you've really only discovered the skeptical movement recently, but I... commented that we're basically natural allies. So I'm just wondering whether that alliance, that natural alliance, is actually implemented. Does it come to fruition?
So in Italy, the Italian Skeptics movement is running our Ask for Evidence campaign in Italian. So that is a very concrete collaboration almost. I mean, we don't really get involved, but so they run it on their own. But they use our resources and our approach for their own Ask for Evidence platform. The skeptics community has been very helpful as well for our Evidence Matters event in the Parliament to help identify citizens across Europe who care about evidence. So I do think there's a good collaboration, and it's helpful for both Sense About Science and the skeptics, I think.
And is there something that skeptics around the world can do to help?
Well, in Europe, yes.
Because they can translate it from English to other languages.
Exactly. I've had so I did a general call in my presentation. If there's anybody who wants to do some volunteering work and make translations, that would be great. And loads of people have approached me.
That's great.
And so that's great, because I think that is quite typical of the skeptics people or movement people. They are willing to invest in this. So they're willing to put some time and effort in it. That's great. We're still running our Evidence Matters campaign, and we're still motivating citizens across Europe to write to their MEPs to say, we want you to use evidence. And intention is for every member of the European Parliament to have received at least one email, but hopefully a lot, from their constituents saying that. So that's also something that the European skeptics definitely can do. And for the rest, our Ask for Evidence campaign, use it, ask for evidence and do it through our website, and we have a log of it. And we write those stories up sometimes to be inspiration and motivation for others to do the same.
So if people who are listening to this interview want to find out more and perhaps get involved, where can they do that?
Exactly. So you can just have a look at our website, see what kind of things we do. senseaboutscience.org, I think.
Okay. We will check that, and we will put the right link in the show notes.
Yeah, exactly. Great. And Ask for Evidence is a website on its own. I think mainly the Ask for Evidence campaign is most useful, and researchers across the world, because we don't limit the Voice Network, and apparently, it stretches as far as Australia.
Yes.
So definitely researchers across the globe can join the Voice Network, and I think it's really great for them, not just the training sessions that we provide, but to find allies, to find people like them who also are willing to stand up for science and invest some of their very scarce but precious time and effort in that.
Great. Sophie, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Grain of salt now. Grain of salt, you gotta take it with a...
Hi, this is Ben Radford.
And this is Pasquale Romero from the Squaring the Strange podcast.
Every week, my co-host and I cast a skeptical eye at a different topic.
Monsters, ghosts, demons, mysteries, and even current events are dissected and discussed with a fun, unscripted, and skeptical take that you're sure to enjoy.
Find us at squaringthestrange.com, iTunes, or on your favorite podcast platform.
We know CSIcon's underway because there are tango lessons down here at the lobby bar. I'm with Susan Gerbic. Hi! Susan, I must thank you for your series of interviews that we've all been enjoying lately from your trip across Europe.
Oh, wasn't that a blast? I am so glad that I was able to share that with the listeners. It made me feel like I wasn't quite alone, because I was recording.
Yeah, and you spoke to some very interesting people, and you're telling me that the Italian conference was huge.
Yes, huge. There was at least 800 people.
It's very impressive. I would love to see it one day. You and Randy were there, right?
Randy and I were there. Mark Edward was there. It was the ESP podcast people. Well, Andrash was there. It was all in Italian. They had to translate for myself and for Randy whenever we were on stage. But other than that, the entire conference was done in Italian.
And so you had an amazing trip. How many conferences did you end up going to?
Well, I only went to 2 main conferences. I'm at CSIcon right now, so this is the 3rd within about a month. But everywhere I went, we did a Skeptics in the Pub. So they arranged it for us being there. It wasn't like we happened on a Skeptics in the Pub, we went there. But as we were on tour, we stopped and we lectured at each location. So I think Honestly, I don't know how many countries I was in, but during the almost a month I was gone, I slept in 13 different beds. I had 11 flights, went through many different currencies, and met so many people. It was so much fun. It was a great overview of being able to see the health of the skeptic community. Every other day, probably every second day, I was in a different country in a different skeptic group that was kind of hosting me, and I asked a lot of questions. I'm hoping to write this all up because I don't think anybody's done an overview of the community, especially the European community as a whole.
It's very changing. It's that's not the word I'm looking for. What is the word I'm looking for? It's malleable. Evolving. That might be a way we can say it. But anyway, here we are in what they call the lobby bar at the Excalibur Hotel, which is opposite the registration desk.
Right.
And we've been having a fun afternoon waiting for people to sort of randomly appear.
Right. And then we text them as we see them standing in line at on Facebook. We'll tag them on Facebook or something. We'll say something about what they're wearing.
Yes. And then we're doing this, and suddenly Richard Dawkins walks past us.
Right.
He's disappeared now.
I don't know where he is.
I think he's gone to his room. And Bob Novello was here earlier. But there's a nice little group. We're having a good time, and you just had a tango lesson.
Yes, I had a tango lesson from someone who is an expert on the tango from Argentina.
From Argentina?
Yeah, this is Paula Serrano. She's brilliant. Now she's getting a cha-cha lesson from one of my other editors, Rob Palmer.
Well, Susan, it's great to see you here at CSIcon, and I think we're in for a wonderful 4 days.
I am really looking forward to this. This is going to be... I don't know what I'm going to do whenever this is over. I mean, I don't have anything planned for months.
It is Monday morning. It's all over. We're at the Luxor Hotel. We just had a breakfast. I'm with Susan Gerbic. Susan, we just heard from you before the whole convention started. Now it's all over. What are your impressions as we try to make our way through this maze of poker machines?
And cigarettes. Well, it was superior to probably the past ones we've done. But they're all unique and different. The talks were great. My memories are more about the things that happened after or during, around, not during the lectures. Some of my best memories were of just interactions we had, the contacts we made, the friendships. Being able to hang out with people that, like yourself, that we've had a long friendship with, and then so many new people. I was so excited. It's just conference attendance. People, I tell you this all the time. You have to go and meet these people. You cannot just sit at home and interact with them on Facebook or wherever and watch the videos, the lectures on YouTube. There's so much more to conference attendance. You have to come and see these people.
Yeah, it's not just talks, is it? Of course.
No, there's so much more. You have to go and shake their hand, share a beer, a coffee, or just whatever.
Or hang out with George Tarab while he plays a few tunes.
Oh, yes. There's so much going on. And it's not just the celebrities and the speakers. It's just the average person you meet, and you make contact with them, and you have a friendship that will last maybe for years. It's wonderful.
I'll try to describe to the listeners now where we are. We're walking from the Luxor Hotel, which is a giant pyramid, to the Excalibur, which is sort of mock medieval times, which never really existed, with swords and knights and things. But we are walking through this cavernous entryway, which is what you might think the interior of a pyramid could possibly look like if it was done in America, which it is.
I feel that pyramid power. I feel so much stronger being here with the energy from the pyramid. I don't know about you, Richard, but...
Oh, absolutely. I feel it every time. Well, I really enjoyed CSIcon this year. I didn't go last year. In fact, the last time I was at CSIcon, I think, was 2011 or 2012, which was in New Orleans. Yes,
I didn't go to that one. Yeah, we're going to be doing another CSIcon 2018 in mid-October. It's going to be at a bigger casino. It's also going to be in Vegas, and I highly recommend you get yourselves here. We're going to be able... This one sold out. We absolutely filled it as full as we possibly could. I think 550 people. no more room for anybody else here. So the next event will be a room for 1,200 people. So you got to get yourself here.
Yeah, I can recommend it. I've had a thoroughly enjoyable time. Now we're just walking now on a land bridge, an enclosed land bridge, going over one of the huge streets here between the hotels. We're on a moving walkway. So Las Vegas is sort of like Disneyland on steroids sometimes, I think. There's roller coasters and all sorts of things.
This place is just like, I would never go to Vegas on my own. To me, this is just so fake and ridiculous. And then the cigarettes. But beyond that, there's so much more happening. So don't let any of that stop you. Being with people and laughing at the oxygen bars and the things we see, the power balance kind of demonstrations that we see as we walk along, and the absolute fraudness of people are trying to constantly get you to come over here, I want to show you something. Hey, let me give you this. Let me, come in and let me sell you this.
Yeah, that happens. It's not a big deal, though. It happened. Now this is the second part of our land bridge crossing, and we look over, there's the monorail over there between the Luxor and hello. Girls' Night Out back. Thunder Down Under. They're performing here, yes.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. There's so much to see. You can see right now the Tropicana, where we were there a few years ago, monorail.
But we've mentioned cigarettes a couple of times, and it's worth mentioning that the hotels, the casinos here in Las Vegas, you can smoke, and people do. And it can be a little intense.
Right, so you have to kind of pick your battles. You move to a hotel room or a quieter area. We're always looking for a nice place that's less smoky. What I understand, what we were just told at breakfast, is that the new hotel we're going to be going to, the new casino, there's a sports bar that's really big, and there's no smoking allowed in it, and that's where people will probably hang out.
That's called the West something or other. I can't think off the top of my head what it is. Westgate, thank you, random stranger over there. And that used to be, somebody said it used to be the Hyatt, I think, or something like that.
I don't know about that.
It was an old hotel.
Yeah. The
Hilton, thank you.
Starts at the age.
Hilton. So the old Hilton is now transformed, and we'll see what it's like next year if I'm lucky enough to be back.
Well, this is going to be fun. And you know what I keep saying? Let's go to CSIcon. Really, actually, people, go to anything, because it's all good. I mean, some are a little bit different than others, but for the most part, try to get yourself to something, even if it's just your local Skeptics in the Pub or Skepticon. The Sydney Skeptics in the Pub is amazing. I have to speak to that. Those guys show up in mass numbers. It's so much fun. So do something. Oh, there's an oxygen bar up there.
We're just passing an oxygen bar. The massages look good, but the rest of it I don't think is terribly great. But there's all sorts of things here, really. Magnet Max shop. There's a whole store we're passing right now devoted to dragons. I kid you not. Souvenirs. We're passing electronic booth. What's this one? Bath salts or something like that. So it's, for 1 week of the year or 5 days or 4 days, I do like Las Vegas.
I agree, but only because my friends are here and the people that I haven't met yet that will become friends.
Passing the food court, and just around the corner, I don't think we should bother the poor person who's there, is the store selling the power balance type bracelets using the demonstrations of the applied kinesiology. There it is. It's called Pure Life. And she's on the phone, so she doesn't worry too much about it. Oh, she's taking a photograph of it now.
So I can go look at see if they have a Wikipedia page that needs to be updated.
That's a good idea. I think you should do that.
These are dime a dozen. Once one goes, the next one comes in, and the more information we can get about this type of power balance kind of thing, even though they keep changing names, the more information we can get out there, the more likely we can help get this whack-a-mole kind of problem taken care of.
It's a story of the skepticism, I think. I think partly it's whack-a-mole. Anyway, from CSIcon 2017, thank you once again, Susan Gerbic, from Guerrilla Skepticism on Wikipedia.
Yeah!
We are doing a live Bunga Bunga at the Harold Park Hotel.
my God, I know. Bunga Bunga Live. If you want to be part of us recording an entire episode of Bunga Bunga, where you'll be invited to make your own comments, you'll be invited to ask us questions.
Basically, the crank mail section, we're throwing it over to you. We're going to be doing it live in front of people. There'll be special guests.
We've decided to go live. Definitely worth putting in your diary. It's going to be at the Harold Park Hotel. Upstairs in Sydney. And if you think getting upstairs is a problem for you, wait till you see how they winch me in from the helicopter.
Yes, that's right. It's the Festival of Dumb Ideas at the Harold Park Hotel, the 14th of November, really soon. Get tickets now. Tickets are available at trybooking.com, or all the information you need is on the front page of maynard.com.au. See you there. Bring your crank mail. Bring your mum. If you do like it, we're going to do it about once a month, aren't we, Tim?
Yeah, if people come along, we want to do one live Bunga Bunga a month. So you get the comedy, you get the music, you get the fun, you get the insights, you get the opinions, you get the politics, and you get the pants.
All the information at maynard.com.au, and it's all there for you. Or go to the Bunga Bunga Facebook page, and it's all happening.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Wow, what a thrill that was to be in Las Vegas. Despite the recent tragedy, of course. In fact, oddly enough, when I was up in the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe room, which they use for interviews and so on, and we opened the window, we had a view of the crime scene, and that was quite poignant. It sent a chill up the spine. Nevertheless, lots of people were walking around with T-shirts and things saying Las Vegas strong, which was good to see. Oh, and thank you to George Harab, our good friend George Harab from the Geologic podcast, who did a wonderful job emceeing CSIcon in Las Vegas. He was funny, he was charming, and that's what we'd expect from George. In fact, there was a moment when I and Britt, Hermes, and Dr. Agee and Cara Santamaria were waiting in the wings, as it were, to do our panel just outside the door of the large convention room. And George was on stage informing the audience of some notes or something. And we had to we weren't quite ready, so I motioned to George off stage to stretch, to just give us a little bit more time, which he was doing. And then out of the blue, and we're not sure why, one of the staff there at the hotel brought a bucket of ice and water up to the stage and plonked it right on the table, presumably for us to use during our panel, which caught George and the audience completely by surprise. They weren't sure what was going on, and George made a joke out of it. And as the waiter or the staff member was leaving, I thought it was so funny what he did. I rushed forward and shook his hand. Now, the audience took that as me congratulating him on a joke on George, which presumably I initiated, and which I didn't. So all those people who think that I put this guy up to carrying the water on stage, I didn't. I truly didn't. It was just a funny moment. But then halfway through the panel, George got us back anyway, and as we were discussing matters, suddenly he brought this bucket of water right onto the stage in front of everybody, and that got a great laugh. I love those sort of moments at these conventions. And I wonder what sort of funny moments will be coming up at the Australian Skeptics National Convention. You can still buy your tickets. General information, just head for skepticzone.tv and click the various links. Again, I hope you'll be at the dinner on the 18th. But for this week, and I better get back to bed because the jet lag and the cold are taking their toll, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. You can be part of the show by downloading the Voice Byte app at voicebite.com and using the hashtag Skeptic Zone. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.